I always spend most of my summertime in Bear Hollow, West Virginia. It's one of those places you'd probably miss if you were just passing through back roads, scattered homes, the kind of silence that gets into your bones. We've got a few acres tucked just far enough from town to feel like the middle of nowhere, but close enough that you're not totally off the grid, and I like that balance. Always have. It's not some picture-perfect getaway either. The land's mostly unkempt, with a worn trail that wraps around the property, two dirt bikes that barely run, a quad that only works in reverse, and a rusted target my brother welded from scrap steel behind the shed. But there's something comforting about it, knowing every dip in the trail, every tree that's leaning just a little too far. My mountain bike's nothing special, just an old thing I've kept around since high school. I leave it at my parents' house year-round, and every summer it becomes part of the routine. I'll ride when I need a break, or when my head's buzzing too much, or sometimes just to feel the air. No music, no plans, just ride until something shifts, or doesn't. There's something about Bear Hollow that lets thoughts untangle themselves without really going anywhere. You start to think you're alone out here, in a good way. Like the woods are just yours and the birds, and maybe the occasional deer that kicks up gravel near the back trail. But this past summer, I don't know. I keep thinking back to one ride in particular. It started like all the others, but something about it still sticks in my mind, not in a dramatic way, just in a way I haven't been able to shake. That afternoon, something about the sky looked off. I'd stepped out onto the back porch with no real plan. Just one of those slow summer days where the hours blur together, and immediately felt it. The air was heavy, the kind that sticks to your skin before anything even happens. Not hot, just thick. Still, too still. The sky wasn't right either. It had this strange coloring, clouds bruised deep gray and purple, but with streaks of light breaking through like someone had poked holes in the atmosphere. That kind of half glow that doesn't make sense for the time of day. It wasn't sunset, it wasn't storming, it was just off. That mix of quiet and tension where your body knows something's coming even if the forecast doesn't. I pulled out my phone and checked the radar. Said a storm was rolling in, but it looked far enough out. I figured I could get in a quick ride. Nothing long, just to shake the stillness off. The thought of being out in that weird weather didn't bother me. Honestly, I kind of like it. Makes the world feel more raw, more real. There's something about riding through that thick pre-storm air that makes everything sharper. So I grabbed my bike. Tires were still half covered in dust from last week. I didn't even think about where I was going. Just the usual loop around the edge of the property and into the trail that cuts along the woods. I didn't know it at the time, but I remember feeling almost pulled toward the trail that day. Not in a dramatic storybook kind of way. Just drawn, like my body had decided before my brain caught up. Like I had to be out there in it, before the rain hit, before something else did. Most of the ride uphill isn't that bad, but it always catches up to me about halfway through. The slope's not steep, just long, enough to make your legs burn and your lungs start whispering that you should turn around. I didn't. I never do. By the time I reached the clearing, my shirt was clinging to my back and my arms were slick. It's not a real clearing, more of a dip in the trees where the trail widens just a bit and the canopy opens enough to let in some light. I always stop there. It's kind of my unofficial checkpoint. Usually I'll just catch my breath, sip from the bottle strapped to the frame. Sometimes I check my phone even though there's barely a signal out here. That day I did. I don't remember what I looked at. Messages. The radar again? Maybe nothing. Just tapping around out of habit. It was probably longer than I meant, and then I noticed it was quiet, like completely quiet. I didn't register it right away. 1 minute I was scrolling, and the next I realized the wind that had been rustling the trees had gone still, like it had been cut off. No birds, no leaves shifting, not even the buzz of gnats that usually swarm around your ears this time of year. It was that unnatural kind of silence you don't expect outside. The kind that makes your brain tilt sideways, like it knows something isn't lining up. I remember slowly turning my head, not even sure what I was listening for. I didn't hear anything, and maybe that's what got to me most. It wasn't peaceful. It felt wrong, like something was holding its breath, and maybe I should have been holding mine too. I kept looking around, trying not to spook myself. You know how it is. You tell yourself it's just nerves, just your imagination filling in the blanks. I even whispered it in my head. It's nothing. It's just the weather. Like if I said it enough times, I'd believe it. But the silence made it worse. Well, it was that unnatural quiet, like the woods had paused, waiting for something, or someone. I figured it was just the calm before the storm. That's a thing, right? The air gets heavy, animals hunker down, nature sort of goes still. I told myself that's all it was. But then I started to hear something. Not loud, barely there really. A thin kind of sound. Maybe a screech, or a whimper. It was hard to tell. The kind of sound that could have been wind twisting through branches, except there wasn't any wind. Could have been a fox, or a raccoon, or maybe just a tree creaking. But something about it felt off. Too sharp? I don't know. My ears were straining before I even knew why, and then I saw it. Just ahead, off the trail, tucked low behind a tree where the trail curves around the bend, was a shape, hunched down, still. My eyes locked onto it before my brain had time to name it. It wasn't standing, it wasn't moving, but it was there. Something was there. It had the proportions of a person, but the way it was crouched or whatever it was doing felt wrong. Intentional. I didn't stare long, didn't want to. It wasn't fear exactly, it was that gut drop feeling. Like when you realize too late you're not alone. Like someone's been watching, waiting, and you're the one who just noticed. I just wanted to leave. My body was already making that decision before I could really process anything else. I wasn't in the mood to figure it out. I just knew I didn't want to be there anymore. Whatever I thought I saw, or maybe didn't see, it was enough. Time to go. But when I turned around to start heading back down the trail, something stopped me. The path looked off. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. Then I realized there were branches snapped and tossed across the trail like a crude barrier. Not a full block or anything dramatic, just enough that I'd have to slow down, maybe step off the bike. I know that trail. I ride it all the time, and those weren't there earlier. I would have noticed, especially that thick one near the bend, splintered on both ends like it had been broken recently. It didn't look like storm damage. Nothing else had been touched. No windfall, no debris, just this odd cluster of obstacles, right where I needed to go. At first I thought maybe some kids had been messing around or an animal had dragged stuff through, but the longer I looked at it, the more it felt deliberate, like someone was trying to slow something down, or maybe slow me down. I kept repeating to myself that I was overthinking it, that I was just on edge from the quiet, from the shape I saw or thought I saw. But the longer I stood there, the tighter my chest got. I hadn't heard anything behind me, but then again, I hadn't really been listening either. That was the moment I stopped trying to be calm. I just wanted out, and fast. Right then the rain came down hard. No warning, just this sudden pounding sheet like the sky had finally snapped. 1 second I was frozen on the trail, trying to make sense of the branches, and the next I was soaked, blinking through water in my eyes. It should have been a relief, honestly. The silence broke at least. The pattering of raindrops on the trees, the ground, my helmet, it filled the air like static, but it wasn't comforting. If anything, it made everything worse. I couldn't hear anything over it now. No movement, no footsteps, no breathing. If there had been anything behind me, I wouldn't have known. My fingers fumbled a little getting back on the bike. My legs were stiff, like they'd forgotten how to move. But the second my weight shifted and the wheels started rolling downhill, everything locked back into place. Muscle memory. That part of the trail drops fast, narrow, muddy, a few tight curves you usually have to break through. I didn't brake. I didn't care about traction. I didn't care about slipping. I just needed to go. The trees blurred as I picked up speed, and the wind from the descent mixed with the rain in my face. It felt cold and sharp, like tiny needles, but I barely noticed. What I did notice was that I never looked back. Not once. My mind kept screaming not to. Not because I thought something would be there, but because I couldn't handle it if there was. It's strange, I've never been so sure that I didn't want answers. I just wanted distance. And as the trail twisted behind me, I kept telling myself I'd feel better once I was out of the woods. But I didn't, not really. I made it back, soaked and not really sure what had just happened. I think I dropped the bike in the side yard, didn't even bother putting it back where it belonged. My shoes were full of mud, shirt clinging to me like a second skin, hair dripping into my eyes. But none of that really registered at the time. I walked straight through the door without saying a word, didn't see anyone, or maybe I did, and just didn't process it. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like forever, breathing hard, clothes sticking to the sheets. I didn't even towel off. My hands were still shaking, not violently, just this low buzz of adrenaline that wouldn't quit. I kept replaying everything in my head. The silence, the shape, the trail, that pile of branches that shouldn't have been there. I kept telling myself it could have all been normal, things I misread, optical illusions, tricks of the mind. That's the easy answer, the rational one. But something in me wasn't buying it. I did eventually sleep, but not well. At some point, my brain started filling in the blanks on its own. I saw the trail again, but steeper, darker, the trees tighter, and the figure. It was there, but it wasn't crouched anymore. It was upright, closer, moving. I couldn't move in the dream, and I couldn't scream either. I just watched. I woke up like I'd been running, sheets tangled, heart pounding. That kind of waking where it takes a few seconds to remember where you are. It's been a while since then, and I still think about it. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, but more often, I wonder what I didn't see, what I missed, what I almost ran into. I don't know when it really hit me, maybe early June, maybe even before that, but this summer didn't feel the same. Normally, as soon as the weather turned, Brightshore just flipped a switch. Everyone came out of hiding. You'd hear music from beach decks. Pool floaties would be scattered across lawns, people biking barefoot to the bars by dusk. That kind of vibe. And I used to be part of that, fully in it, you know. But this year, the group chats went quiet. The spontaneous "who's around tonight?" Texts started getting replies like "date night" or "we're heading to a wedding out of town." It wasn't just that people were busy. It was that they were somewhere else entirely, in a different phase or something. Most of the guys I'd usually hang with had paired off, settled in, moved on. And me? I was still here, still circling the same spots, still showing up at places out of habit. I told myself I was fine with it. Honestly, I kind of liked the quiet, the independence, or at least I thought I did. But I was still texting people, still reaching out, hoping someone was down for the beach, a bonfire, a beer. I guess I kept waiting for that summer feeling to show up again. That rhythm, that buzz under your skin that told you something unexpected might happen that night. I didn't want to admit it, but I was chasing something. Some version of summer I wasn't ready to let go of yet. Funny how sometimes you get exactly what you think you're asking for, just not in the way you ever imagined. It started off like a filler night. One of those low-effort, last-minute "who's around?" texts that somehow turns into a group at Driftwood Bar, leaning into the same conversations under the same hazy string lights. I wasn't expecting much. I was mostly just trying not to stay in again. Driftwood's the kind of place that smells faintly like old beer and sunscreen. Locals swear it was better 5 years ago. And maybe it was. That night, it was half full. The music was forgettable, and everyone seemed to already know everyone else. That's probably why I noticed the two new faces, Tyler and Marco, mid-30s maybe. Not too much older, but it showed in the way they dressed, the way they moved. Like they'd done this all before. They just sort of appeared near us. No big entrance. One moment we were talking about something stupid, and the next, they were in the circle, laughing at a joke they definitely didn't hear the start of. Nobody questioned it. Maybe we were all just bored enough to welcome new energy. Marco was more the social one, bouncing around. Tyler, though, he hovered, always kind of near me, close, but not too close, asking questions in a way that felt casual at first, until it didn't. There wasn't anything wrong, exactly. But you know when someone's just a little too tuned in to everything you say, like they're trying to memorize the moment in real time. That's the feeling I couldn't shake. I remember thinking, almost jokingly, this feels like one of those nights you look back on later and realize something shifted. I didn't know how true that was going to be, not even close. The following weekend felt unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that settles over a beach town like fog when everyone's paired off or out of town. I didn't want to admit I was restless, but I kept checking my phone, waiting for someone to suggest something. Anything. Then Tyler texted, just a casual, "What are you up to?" The kind that feels like it could go nowhere. I didn't read too much into it. I told him I had nothing going on, which was true, and when he said he could swing by and pick me up, I said okay without really thinking. I honestly thought Marco would be in the car too. I mean, they kind of came as a set last time, right? But when he pulled up, it was just him, alone. He leaned over and told me to hop in the front. I didn't question it. I didn't ask where Marco was or who else we were meeting. I just got in. Maybe I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid. Or maybe I didn't want to admit to myself that something already felt a little off. He said we'd hit a tavern first before heading somewhere more lively, the Marlin's Tail. I'd never heard of it. And that's saying something because I know this town like the back of my hand. When we got there, I knew instantly it wasn't the kind of place people stumbled into. It had this strange reddish glow, dim lighting, walls that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. The kind of place that felt out of time, like it hadn't kept pace with the world. My stomach twisted just a little when we walked in. That flicker of something, discomfort, instinct. I don't know, but I ignored it. I really wish I hadn't. I'd had a little to drink before leaving the house. Just a quick shot while getting ready. Nothing crazy, just enough to shake off the edge of going out solo. By the time we got to the Marlin's Tail, I was already a bit loose, and the dim lighting made it feel easier to sink into the night. Tyler seemed like he was trying to keep the energy up. He ordered drinks before I even asked. First one, then another, then another. It was constant, like he had something to prove. I didn't want to seem uptight, so I matched his pace at first, but then I started to fall behind. I remember one particular moment really clearly. I'd gone to the bathroom just for a second, I thought, and when I got back, there were 2 more drinks waiting on the bar, mine and his. He was already sipping his like it was no big deal. Mine sat there, glowing under the weird red light, just slightly out of place. I still had half of the last one untouched. I laughed it off, said something dumb like slow down, but I drank it anyway. That was the last thing I can say for sure happened. Everything after that is haze, static, like someone cut the film and taped over it. I've replayed it so many times in my head, trying to pull details out of the blackout like maybe they're buried under something else. I can't. I've tried. I still don't know how I got from that bar to wherever I ended up. There's just this void. It's terrifying how quickly it all went dark, how a normal night can just disappear like that. It didn't feel like waking up. It felt like coming to in the middle of something that had already started without me. The first thing I noticed was how cold it was. My arms were goosebumped. The air felt damp, and the floor beneath me was hard, concrete, not carpet. No light, no sounds, no windows. Just pitch black and the kind of stillness that doesn't feel right. I didn't know where I was. I didn't even know if I was in someone's house or something else entirely. My pockets were empty. No phone, no sense of time. I sat there for a minute, maybe longer, just trying to remember anything after that last drink. There was nothing, just a black wall where memory should be. Eventually, I stood up and felt along the wall until I found a switch. When the light came on, it was like stepping into a snapshot of neglect. A hot water heater hummed in the corner, shelves stacked with dusty household supplies, bleach, mop heads, broken buckets. A utility room, basically. But it didn't look like anyone actually used it. I kept telling myself maybe I'd just gotten too drunk. Maybe this was someone's basement guest room or something. But that voice in my head was quieter than the pounding sense that none of this was okay. I opened a side closet, and that's when I saw it. Random stuff that didn't belong. A single sandal, a half-used tube of lip balm, a charm bracelet with a busted clasp. All women's things. Not old enough to be trash, not stored like keepsakes. Just there. They weren't mine. None of them were mine. And no matter how many times I try to rationalize it, I can't come up with a version of the story that makes them make sense. I wasn't even out of the basement yet when I felt it, this shift in the air, like something just changed. There was movement behind me. soft and slow, like someone rising from a couch they'd been sitting on for a while. That was when I realized I wasn't alone down there. It was Tyler. He didn't look surprised to see me up. He just stood there, in the dark, like it was normal. Like waking up on a concrete floor in some locked basement was fine. He started talking, trying to ease the tension. I don't remember the exact words, but it was that same careful, measured tone people use when they want you to stop asking questions. My brain was screaming. Every part of me knew something was off, but I also didn't want to believe what was happening. There was this split inside me, one side wanting to panic, and the other just desperately trying to make it through without making things worse. I thought, maybe if I just went along for a second, I could get out of there. Maybe if I didn't push too hard, I could find the stairs. But then I said I wanted to leave, and everything changed. The tone of his voice hardened, subtle at first, then unmistakable, like he'd been playing a part, and finally dropped the act. It didn't feel like he was talking to a person anymore. It felt like he was controlling a situation. I don't know how I kept my head. Somehow I did. I found a moment. I moved when he wasn't expecting it, and I got my hands on what I needed. I didn't think, I just acted. Grabbed what was mine, and I ran. Fast. I didn't look back. My brother pulled up maybe 10 minutes after I called him. I was barefoot, still holding my stuff, standing out on the curb like someone who'd just stepped out of a nightmare. I don't remember what I said when I got in the car. Maybe not much. I was shaking, but not from the cold, just trying to hold it together long enough to get home. I told him everything, at least everything I could remember, which wasn't much. The blank space in my memory felt huge, like a crater. The next morning I went to urgent care. I needed to know what had happened to me. What they found was a drug called Zopralin. I hadn't even heard of it before. Apparently it knocks you out fast, keeps your memory fuzzy if you wake up at all. That scared me more than anything else. The fact that someone had made a decision for me without me ever knowing. After that, I found a lawyer. We've started putting a case together, but it's slow, frustrating. There's no clean trail, no undeniable proof. I didn't have a camera on me. There's no bar receipt with a timestamp saying this is the moment it all went wrong. Just bits and pieces. My word, my instincts, a drug test, a memory that cuts off right before things got bad. But I know what I felt. I know what I saw in that basement closet. I think about those items, those little personal things that didn't belong there every night. And no matter how many times I replay everything, I never get closer to an answer. It's like trying to solve a puzzle that's missing its edges. I keep hoping it'll start to make sense if I go over it one more time, but it never does. Every summer, like clockwork, my parents pack up and head out to our lake place in Beaufort. It's their thing, weeks of peace, fishing, and wine on the deck while I stay back home. It's not like I mind. Actually, I used to love it. The freedom felt kind of sacred. No rules, no hovering, just me and the two cats, floating in a quiet little world with way too much space and no one to share it with. It felt like mine. Like the house changed once they left. Our place isn't anything wild. 3 bedrooms, kind of old, nothing fancy inside. But the backyard, that's what sets it apart. The canal runs right behind it, like it's trying to keep secrets. On the other side, there's nothing but marshland and a stretch of trees that always seem a little too still. It's calm out here, sometimes too calm. At night, the only sound is crickets and the occasional splash of something in the water. That used to make me feel safe, like no one else existed for miles. We've got a couple of jet skis and a flashy speedboat out back, courtesy of my dad's summer project addiction. They sit in the yard like trophies, begging to be looked at. I never thought much about how they probably catch eyes from the canal, especially at night when the lights hit them just right. They make the house stand out more than I realized, more than I wanted it to. Funny thing is, I never once thought about how exposed we might be. The house always felt like a hidden little pocket of the world. I guess when you grow up somewhere, you stop noticing the things that make you vulnerable. I don't anymore. That night with Lena, it was one of those first warm nights that finally feels like summer isn't teasing you anymore. The kind where the air hangs heavy but not in a bad way, and even the bugs seem a little slower. We weren't doing anything special, just floating in the hot tub out back, sipping cheap drinks and letting the day fade. The kind of night you don't think twice about, not until later. I remember when the jets cut off. That hum, that white noise you don't notice until it's gone. The silence hit like a wall. No breeze, no voices, just stillness. That's when I heard it. A sound I didn't place at first. Soft, almost gentle, like something slicing through water. Paddle strokes. Steady. Rhythmic. Not hurried, not loud, just there. It took a second to realize someone was drifting by on the canal. A canoe, I think. Couldn't see much. It was too dark. No lamp on the boat. No phone light. Nothing. Just a shape against darker shapes. A person, alone, slowly sliding past our yard like they were trying not to be seen. No words. No wave. Just passed by in silence. I didn't say anything to Lena. I just watched until the figure slipped out of view behind the bushes lining the canal. Didn't feel scared, exactly. More like off, like something didn't fit. That part of the canal's not exactly a throughway. It's narrow, winding, mostly dead ends. You don't just pass through it for fun, not at night. I tried to let it go, told myself it was probably nothing, just some night paddler out for a weird solo trip, but it stuck with me. Something about how quiet it all was, how wrong it felt in that silence. It was late by then, probably close to 1. Upstairs, lights low, AC humming. The cats curled into soft shapes on the floor. Lena and I were in bed, not really talking, just drifting in and out while the TV flickered. I wasn't fully awake, but I wasn't asleep either. That weird middle ground where sounds blur and shadows start to feel heavier than they should. I think what pulled me out of it was the glow. Not a flash, not a sudden burst, just this soft movement of light across the wall. At first I thought it was something from the TV, some weird reflection, but then it hit the window, and I realized it wasn't coming from inside. It was a flashlight, definitely a flashlight. The beam was jerky, twitchy, not focused. It jumped from one part of the window to the next, like whoever held it didn't know exactly where to look. But the longer I watched, the more I felt like they did, like they knew exactly where we were, like they were waiting for something. I didn't hear anything. No voices, no footsteps, just the faint movement of that light and the creeping pressure building behind my ribs. That tightness you get when your body realizes something's wrong before your brain does. It wasn't the sound. There wasn't any. That's what made it worse. I told myself it was probably nothing. Some teenager screwing around on the trail by the canal. A fisherman with poor timing. But that didn't track. The light wasn't scanning the water or the yard. It was aimed at my window. Focused, too specific, too deliberate. And deep down I knew exactly who it was. That guy from earlier. He wasn't passing by anymore. He'd stopped. He was watching. I just stood there for a while. Not long enough to be reasonable, not short enough to be brave, just frozen in that weird headspace where logic and instinct don't agree. The room was dark except for the glow of the TV, and Lena was still half wrapped in the sheets, not really asking questions yet. My eyes were fixed on the window like it would give me some kind of answer. It didn't. I kept thinking maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was a neighbor, someone lost, someone confused. The canal backs into the woods, but there's a park trail on the far side. Could have been anyone. I tried to sell that idea to myself over and over. I said it was nothing, but I think I knew even then that it wasn't. I just didn't want to admit it out loud. Still, I moved. Without really deciding to, I threw on a t-shirt, slid on whatever shoes were closest to the door, and headed downstairs. I didn't pause, didn't check the locks again, didn't grab my phone, just opened the door like I wasn't stepping into something that didn't make sense. Looking back, I can't figure out what I was doing. Was it pride? Some kind of reflex? Trying to look calm for Lena? Or was I just trying to feel like I had control over something I didn't understand? That's the part that gets me. I wasn't scared, not really. Not then. I was numb, focused, like I was following a script I didn't remember agreeing to. And maybe that's the scariest part. How easy it was to convince myself everything was fine, to step into the night like it wasn't about to fall apart. I remember stepping outside and trying not to let it show whatever was building in my chest. I didn't want it on my face. The yard lights snapped on, bright enough to cast hard shadows across the lawn, but they didn't make me feel any safer. If anything, it made everything feel more exposed, me especially. I didn't see anyone at first, just the same stillness, the same quiet. It felt like the whole canal was holding its breath, and then I heard her, Lena, from upstairs. Not calling my name like she was confused, screaming it, like something had already happened. That kind of scream that makes your legs move before your brain catches up. I didn't know what was happening yet, but I knew it wasn't good. I turned just in time to see him. There was no flashlight now, no limping, no sign of weakness. Just this dark figure barreling out from the side yard. Fast, too fast. He'd been waiting, hiding, watching. I can still picture how fast he moved once I was fully out in the open. No hesitation. He wasn't trying to get help, he was trying to get in. I don't even know how I made it back inside before he reached me. Just instincts. I slammed the door and locked it, and not even 2 seconds later he hit it so hard the frame shook. Then came the twisting of the knob, like he couldn't believe it was locked, like he thought he had the right to be there. That image of the handle jerking back and forth burned itself into my brain. He wasn't just some lost guy on the water. He had a plan. He thought this place was open, thought I was alone. Maybe I would have been. The next morning felt fake, like nothing should be allowed to look normal after a night like that. Sunlight pouring in, cats pacing like nothing had happened, birds chirping outside like they hadn't been silent just hours before. I didn't say much to Lena. Neither of us really wanted to fill in the blanks out loud, but I couldn't sit with the silence either. I needed something solid, proof, so I went for the camera system. It's basic, nothing high-end, just a few outdoor cams my dad set up last summer after a string of break-ins down the block. Enough to feel like we had a buffer. I hadn't really thought about them until now, but suddenly they felt like my last shot at understanding any of this. I pulled up the app, logged in, and immediately felt it. That shift. You know when you're expecting something to be there, and the emptiness hits even harder than a bad answer. That's what this was. The timeline for the previous night. Blank. Not glitched, not scrambled, just gone, as if it had never recorded at all. I refreshed, restarted, even pulled out the old manual, like that was gonna help. But it was clear someone had wiped the footage. Not accidentally, not remotely. It had to be someone physically here, which meant he wasn't just lurking in the dark. He'd gotten close. Close enough to know where the cameras were. Close enough to touch them. Maybe hours before I ever saw the flashlight. That's the part that messes with me. I was looking for answers, but all I found was confirmation that he'd been watching longer than I thought, planning longer than I thought. And if he got that close before, what else did I miss? The cops came, just like my dad said they would. A couple cruisers, 2 officers in uniforms trying to make it seem routine. They were calm, professional. I kept hoping they'd react differently. More concerned, maybe even rattled, but they didn't. Just took notes, walked the yard, flashed lights into corners I'd already checked a dozen times. They knocked on a few neighbors' doors, asked if anyone had seen or heard anything strange. No one had. Of course they hadn't. The guy in the canoe or kayak, whatever it was, he was just gone. No scrape marks on the grass, no paddle left behind, no signs of struggle, nothing, like he'd melted right into the marsh. And maybe he had. It's thick out there, easy to lose sight of anything once it disappears into that green. But it didn't feel like luck. It felt like he knew what he was doing, like he'd done this before. That's what sticks with me. The way it all just ended. There was no resolution, no follow-up, no footage, no name, no face, just that flashlight and that sprint and that bang against the door. Then nothing. I've played it back so many times in my head. What if Lena hadn't screamed? What if I'd waited a few more seconds before turning on the lights? What if he was already in the yard before I ever opened that door? I keep thinking maybe he didn't want to rob the place. Maybe it wasn't even about the house. Maybe it was just about me being alone. Or maybe it was random, and I'm giving him too much credit. I don't know. I'll never know. And that's what eats at me the most. Not knowing what he wanted. Not knowing if he's still out there.